The cargo ship Gentle Wing was dying. Captain knew this truth in his bones as he stood on the bridge and watched the emergency lights flash red across every console. The reactor had failed 3 hours ago. Life support would follow soon, and they were floating in a region of space where no friendly ships ever traveled. Was old by standards. His silver-scaled skin had grown dull over the years, and his 4 eyes did not see as clearly as they once did. He had commanded merchant vessels for 40 cycles, carrying goods between allied worlds. He had never lost a ship. He had never lost a crew member. But now, drifting in the endless dark of uncharted space, he feared both would happen before the next sunrise on any world. "Captain," said from her communication station. Her voice was steady but could see her hands shaking. She was young, barely 20 cycles old, with bright blue scales that marked her as a coastal. "The distress signal is broadcasting on all frequencies, but there is no response." "How long have we been sending it?" asked. 6 hours now." 6 hours. In that time, their power reserves had dropped by half. The heating systems were already failing. Could feel the cold creeping into the bridge, a slow death that would take them all before the oxygen ran out. He looked around at his crew. 47, most of them young traders on their first deep space assignment. They had signed up for adventure and profit. Instead, they had found a slow death in the void. Engineer worked frantically at the reactor controls, his gray scales slick with sweat. He had been trying to restart the main power core for hours, but the damage was too severe. A micro-asteroid had punched through their shielding during the last jump, striking the reactor housing. The damage had been invisible at first. Then the warnings came. Then the power died. "I cannot fix it," said finally, his voice breaking. "The core is cracked. If I try to restart it, the whole ship will explode." Closed his eyes. He had expected this answer, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. They were truly trapped. "Then we wait," he said quietly. "We wait and we hope." But hope was hard to hold in the darkness between stars. The Gentle Wing drifted through empty space, far from any shipping lane, far from any colony world. They had taken a shortcut through uncharted territory to save time on their delivery. Now that decision would cost them everything. The hours passed slowly. Crew members huddled together for warmth as the temperature continued to drop. Some of them prayed to the old gods of Prime. Others simply sat in silence, staring at the walls. A few of the youngest crew members cried quietly, their tears freezing on their scales. Never left her station. She kept adjusting the signal, boosting its range, changing frequencies. Knew it was probably useless, but he did not tell her to stop. The work gave her purpose. It gave her hope. And hope was all any of them had left. On the 7th hour, something changed. "Captain," said suddenly, her voice sharp with surprise, "I am detecting a response." His head snapped toward her. "What, from where?" "Unknown origin. The signal is coming from deep space, bearing 047, multiple contacts." Her fingers flew across her console as she analyzed the data. "They are moving fast, very fast. They will reach us in approximately 2 hours." A murmur of relief spread through the bridge. Crew members embraced each other. Someone laughed out loud for the first time in hours. Rescue was coming. They were saved. But did not celebrate. He walked slowly towards station, his old bones aching with cold and worry. Something about her expression troubled him. Her scales had gone pale, almost white. Her hands had stopped shaking and now lay frozen on her console. He said quietly, "What is wrong?" She looked up at him with eyes full of fear. "The ship's signatures, Captain. I cross-referenced them with our database." She swallowed hard. "They do not match any allied species." Felt his hearts begin to beat faster. "Then who are they?" Turned her screen toward him. The analysis was complete, the identification confirmed. Stared at the results and felt the blood drain from his face. Humans. The approaching fleet was human. The relief on the bridge died instantly. Every knew about humans. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They were born on a planet of nightmares. Earth was a world of crushing gravity, violent storms, extreme temperatures, and endless predators. The creatures that survived there were built for destruction. They were strong, fast, and terrifyingly resilient. They could survive injuries that would kill any other species. They could adapt to almost any environment. They were the galaxy's most feared race. They had heard stories. Humans had fought wars on a dozen worlds. They had defeated enemies that should have been impossible to beat. Their soldiers were legendary. Their ships were weapons of terrible power. And they were coming here, to the gentle wing, where 47 helpless waited in a dead ship. "Turn off the signal," someone shouted from the back of the bridge. "Stop calling them." "It is too late," whispered. "They have already locked onto us. They know we are here." Panic began to spread. Crew members argued loudly about what to do. Some wanted to hide. Others wanted to arm themselves. A few suggested surrendering immediately and begging for mercy, but knew that none of these options would matter. If the humans wanted them dead, they would die. It was that simple. He raised his hand for silence. Slowly, the shouting stopped. Every eye turned toward him. "We do not know what the humans want," said carefully. "We know only the stories. Stories can be wrong. Stories can be exaggerated." "The stories say they conquered 3 systems in a single cycle," someone replied. "The stories say they eat their enemies." "The stories say many things," answered. "But I have lived a long time, I have met many species, and I have learned that fear often paints a darker picture than truth." He paused, looking around at his frightened crew. "We sent a distress signal," they answered. "Perhaps they mean to help us, perhaps not, but we have no choice. We cannot run. We cannot fight. We can only wait and see what kind of creatures these humans really are." The crew fell silent. They did not look convinced, but they had no argument to offer. The captain was right. They were trapped, and their fate now rested in alien hands. The 2 hours passed like an eternity. Tracked the approaching fleet on her sensors, calling out updates every few minutes. The ships were large, much larger than the gentle wing. She counted 12 vessels in total, including one massive carrier that dwarfed everything else. These were not merchant ships. These were warships built for combat. When the fleet finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the gentle wing shuddered from the energy release. Watched through the main viewport as the human ships materialized from nothing, appearing in flashes of light that hurt his eyes. They were gray and angular, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. They moved with precision, surrounding the dying cargo ship like predators circling wounded prey. "They are hailing us," said. Took a deep breath, put it through. The main screen flickered to life, and saw a human for the first time. She was tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back from her face. Her skin was a warm brown color, smooth and scaleless. Her eyes were strange, forward-facing like a predator, with dark centers that seemed to stare straight through him. She wore a uniform of deep blue, decorated with symbols he did not recognize. Behind her, other humans moved across what appeared to be a military command center. "This is Admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet," the human said. Her voice was calm and clear, speaking in accented galactic common. "We received your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" Stared at her for a long moment. The question seemed almost absurd. They were dying. Of course they required assistance. But he did not know if accepting help from was better or worse than death itself. "We are a cargo vessel," he said finally. "Our reactor has failed. Life support is critical. We have 47 crew members aboard." The human nodded. "Understood. We are dispatching rescue ships now. Please prepare for docking." The communication ended. Stood frozen, uncertain what had just happened. The human had not threatened them. She had not demanded tribute or surrender. She had simply offered help, as if saving alien lives was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Perhaps the stories are wrong," said quietly. Shook his head. "We will see. Prepare the crew. Tell them to stay calm and cooperate with whatever happens next." The next 30 minutes were the longest of his life. He watched as 3 smaller ships detached from the human carrier and approached the gentle wing. They were sleek and fast, designed for quick response. Their hulls were marked with symbols that he now recognized as human writing. When the lead ship requested docking permission, granted it without hesitation. There was no point in refusing. If the humans wanted aboard, they would come aboard whether he allowed it or not. The crew gathered near the main airlock, armed with whatever they could find. Maintenance tools, fire extinguishers, broken pieces of pipe. It was pathetic new. These weapons would do nothing against creatures but holding something made the crew feel better. It gave them the illusion of control. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The inner door began to open. Held his breath, his old hearts pounding against his ribs. This was the moment. This was when they would learn the truth about humanity. The door slid open, and the humans stepped through. They were tall, even taller than had expected. Their bodies were dense with muscle, clearly built for a world of heavy gravity. They moved with a strange grace, each step controlled and deliberate. Their eyes scanned the crew, taking in every detail with predator efficiency. But they carried no weapons. Their hands were empty, raised slightly in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. The leader, a male with short black hair and a scar across his chin, stepped forward slowly. He wore the same blue uniform as the admiral, but his rank markings were different. "I am Commander," he said in careful Galactic common. His accent was thick but understandable. "We are here to help. Please lower your tools. We mean you no harm." They did not move. They stared at the humans with wide, frightened eyes, their makeshift weapons trembling in their hands. Understood their fear. Every instinct told them to run, to fight, to do something. But he also saw something in the humans' eyes that surprised him. Kindness. It was faint, hidden beneath the predator gaze, but it was there. This human was not looking at them like prey. He was looking at them like someone who wanted to help. Stepped forward and lowered his pipe. "We accept your assistance," he said, "and we thank you for answering our call." Commander smiled. It was a strange expression, showing teeth in a way that would be threatening for most species. But somehow on the human's face it looked warm. "That is what we do," he said simply. "We answer calls." Behind him, more humans poured through the airlock, carrying cases of equipment and supplies. Watched them work with growing amazement. They moved fast, faster than any species he had ever seen. Within minutes, they had set up portable heaters and oxygen generators. Within an hour, they had restored basic life support. The gentle wing was still dying, but for the first time in many hours, they felt warm. They felt alive, and they began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy's most feared species was not as monstrous as the stories claimed. Captain stood on the bridge and watched the humans work. He did not understand them. He did not trust them, but he could not deny what he was seeing with his own 4 eyes. They had come, and instead of destruction they had brought hope. Admiral stood on the command deck of the Soul's Promise and stared at the distress signal on her screen. It was weak, barely a whisper in the vast emptiness of space. Most ships would have missed it entirely, but the Soul's Promise had the best sensors in the Earth Defense Fleet, and her communications officer had caught the signal 3 hours ago. "It is definitely a distress call," said Lieutenant Bora from her station. She was young, barely 25 years old, with sharp eyes and quick fingers. "Origin. They are reporting reactor failure and critical life support. 47 crew members aboard." Studied the coordinates. The signal was coming from a region of space that humanity had not yet explored. It was far from any shipping lane, far from any colony world. The ship was in the middle of nowhere, dying in the dark. "How far?" asked. 2 hours at maximum speed." Did not hesitate. "Change course. All ships follow the Soul's Promise. We are responding to a distress call." The order went out across the fleet. 12 ships turned as one. their engines flaring with blue fire as they accelerated toward the signal. The Soul's Promise led the way, her massive hull cutting through space like a knife through water. Some admirals would have questioned the decision. They were not human allies. They were not enemies either, but the two species had never signed any treaties or agreements. Responding to their distress call would cost fuel, time, and resources. It would delay their patrol mission by at least a day. But did not care about any of that. Someone was calling for help. That was all that mattered. She had been a soldier for 30 years. She had fought in the border wars and the pirate campaigns. She had seen terrible things and done terrible things. But she had also learned one truth that guided her entire career. Strength without mercy was just cruelty. Power without compassion was just tyranny. Humanity had the most powerful fleet in this region of space. That power meant nothing if they did not use it to help those in need. "Admiral," said her executive officer commander. He was a tall man with a scar on his chin, earned during a boarding action against raiders 5 years ago. "They may not welcome our presence. They have heard the stories about us." "I know," replied. "We will have to show them that stories are not always true." Nodded, he understood. Every human in the fleet understood. The galaxy feared them. Other species saw humans as monsters from a planet of nightmares. They expected violence, conquest, destruction. It was the burden humanity carried, a reputation built on fear and misunderstanding. But fear could be overcome. Misunderstanding could be corrected. All it took was patience, kindness, and the courage to extend a hand to those who expected a fist. The 2 hours passed quickly. Used the time to prepare her rescue teams. She assigned commander to lead the boarding party, with doctor in charge of medical operations. Engineer Wu would handle technical repairs. Each team member was briefed on biology, culture, and communication protocols. They were told to move slowly, speak softly, and avoid any action that could be seen as aggressive. "Remember," told them in the final briefing, "these people are scared. They are dying, and they think we are here to hurt them. Our job is to prove them wrong. Our job is to save their lives and show them what humanity really stands for." The teams nodded. They were ready. When the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the Gentle Wing was exactly where the signal had indicated. It was a small ship, barely a tenth the size of the Soul's Promise. Its lights were dim, flickering on and off as the failing power system struggled to keep up. The ship was clearly damaged, drifting helplessly through space like a wounded animal. Opened a communication channel. "This is Admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" There was a long pause. Then a voice answered, thin and uncertain. "We are a cargo vessel. Our reactor has failed. Life support is critical. We have 47 crew members aboard." "Understood. We are dispatching rescue ships now. Please prepare for docking." Ended the call and turned to, "Go, bring them home." Saluted and left the command deck. Within minutes, 3 rescue frigates detached from the fleet and moved toward the Gentle Wing. The Steady Hand led the way, with standing on its bridge and watching the dying ship grow larger through the viewport. He could only imagine what they were feeling right now. They had called for help and monsters had answered. They were probably terrified, expecting death or enslavement or worse. Had seen that fear before in the eyes of other species when they first encountered humans. It was always the same. The wide eyes, the trembling hands, the desperate attempts to flee or fight. But fear could not stop him from doing his job. Someone needed help. He was going to provide it. That was all. The Steady Hand docked with the Gentle Wing smoothly, the 2 ships connecting with a soft clunk of metal against metal. Gathered his team at the airlock. Doctor stood beside him, her medical kit ready. Engineer Wu carried a portable generator on his back. Behind them, a dozen crew members held supplies, oxygen tanks, heating units, food packs, water containers. "Ready?" asked. Nodded, ready. The airlock cycled open, and they stepped through. The first thing noticed was the cold. The gentle wing was freezing, the temperature barely above what humans considered dangerous. For those who came from a warm tropical world, it must have been agonizing. He could see frost forming on the walls, ice crystals glittering in the dim emergency lights. The second thing he noticed was the fear. The crew had gathered near the airlock, armed with pipes and tools and whatever else they could find. They stared at the humans with wide, terrified eyes. Some of them were shaking, whether from cold or fear could not tell. They looked like prey animals facing a predator, frozen in that moment before flight or death. Raised his hand slowly, showing his empty palms. "I am Commander," he said in careful Galactic Common. He had practiced the pronunciation for weeks, knowing that one day he might need it. "We are here to help. Please lower your tools. We mean you no harm." Nobody moved. They continued to stare, their makeshift weapons trembling in their grips. Could see the calculation in their eyes, the desperate weighing of options. Trust the monsters or die in the cold. Neither choice was good, but one of them was survival. An old stepped forward. His scales were silver and dull, marked with the signs of age. He held a metal pipe in his hands, but he lowered it slowly as he approached. "We accept your assistance," the old one said, "and we thank you for answering our call." Smiled, a gesture he knew might look threatening to aliens unfamiliar with human expressions, but he could not help it. Relief flooded through him, warm and welcome. The first barrier had been crossed. "That is what we do," he said. "We answer calls." Behind him, his team moved into action. They spread through the ship like a wave, carrying supplies and setting up equipment. Doctor went straight to the medical bay, where she found 3 suffering from hypothermia. She treated them quickly, wrapping them in heating blankets and injecting them with warming agents designed for alien physiology. Engineer Wu headed for the reactor room. He found it sealed, the door locked to contain potential radiation leakage, but his scanners showed that the danger was minimal. The reactor was cracked, not melted. There was no radiation. There was just a broken engine that could no longer power the ship. "Can you fix it?" the old captain asked, following Wu through the corridors. Wu studied his readings and shook his head. "Not here, not with what we have. The damage is too severe." He looked at the captain with sympathy. "But we can keep you alive. We have generators, supplies, everything you need. And when we are done here, we will take you somewhere safe." The captain stared at him. "Take us where?" "Wherever you need to go. Wherever your people will come for you." The captain seemed unable to process this information. He stood in silence for a long moment, his 4 eyes blinking slowly. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Why?" It was such a simple question, but Wu understood the weight behind it. Why would help strangers? Why would monsters show mercy? Why would the most feared species in the galaxy risk their own lives to save aliens they had never met? Wu thought about his answer carefully. He thought about his home on Earth, about the cities and forests and oceans he had left behind. He thought about his family, his friends, his comrades. He thought about what it meant to be human, to carry the weight of that terrifying reputation while trying to prove that there was more to his species than violence. "Because you called," he said finally, "and because no one should die alone in the dark." The captain had no response to that. He simply stood and watched as the humans worked, his old eyes filled with something that might have been hope. On the bridge of the Soul's Promise, Admiral monitored the rescue operation through constant reports from her teams. The ship was in worse condition than expected. Life support would fail completely within 6 hours. The reactor could not be repaired. The only option was evacuation. She gave the order without hesitation. "Prepare the refugee quarters. We are bringing them aboard." Her crew moved to comply. Quarters were arranged, food was prepared, medical stations were set up. The Soul's Promise was a warship built for combat, but it was also equipped to handle civilian refugees. Humanity had learned long ago that war created victims who needed shelter. Their ships were designed accordingly. Received the evacuation order and began organizing the transfer. They were reluctant at first, frightened at the idea of boarding a human warship, but they had no choice. Their ship was dying. The only path to survival led through the humans. One by one, they crossed through the airlock and entered the steady hand. They moved slowly, their eyes darting nervously around the human ship. The corridors were larger than they expected, built for creatures of greater size. The gravity was heavier, pulling at their bodies with unfamiliar force. Everything felt wrong, alien, dangerous. But the humans guided them gently. They spoke in soft voices, moved with careful steps, offered help without being asked. Doctor personally escorted the injured, supporting them with her own body when they stumbled. Crew member Jinnah found a group of young huddled in a corner and sat with them, teaching them simple human games to distract them from their fear. Captain watched all of this with growing confusion. These were creatures from a world of violence and death. They should have been brutal, savage, terrifying. Instead, they were gentle, patient, kind. "I do not understand," he said to Commander as they walked toward the airlock. "The stories say your kind are conquerors, destroyers. Why do you help us?" Paused and considered the question. It was the same question Wu had been asked, the same question every human faced when dealing with other species. The answer was always the same. "The stories are not wrong," said carefully. "We can be conquerors, we can be destroyers. When we need to fight, we fight harder than any species you have ever seen." He met the captain's eyes with a steady gaze. "But we choose when to fight, and we choose when to help. Right now you need help, so that is what we give." Shook his head slowly. "On my world the strong prey on the weak, that is the way of things." "On my world too," admitted. "But we learned something a long time ago. We learned that the strongest thing is not the one that takes, it is the one that gives." He smiled again, that strange human expression that showed teeth. "We are strong enough to destroy you. That means we are strong enough to save you instead." The captain had no answer. He followed the human through the airlock and into the steady hand, leaving behind his dying ship and entering a world he did not understand. Behind him, the last of the crew crossed over. The gentle wing was empty now, a ghost ship drifting in the void. When the transfer was complete, reported to Admiral, "All 47 crew members are aboard. No casualties. The ship is beyond repair." "Understood," replied. "Set course for the nearest Allied station. We will deliver them safely." The fleet turned as one, engines blazing. The Soul's Promise led the way, carrying 47 frightened aliens toward safety. Behind them, the gentle wing grew smaller and smaller until it vanished into the darkness. Captain stood at a viewport and watched his ship disappear. He had lost everything, his cargo, his vessel, his mission. But he was alive. His crew was alive, and they were alive because had answered their call. He did not understand humans. He did not trust them. But he was beginning to believe that perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about them all along. Perhaps the monsters were not monsters after all. The airlock of the steady hand opened with a soft hiss, and they stepped into the human ship for the first time. Captain led the way, his old bones aching from the cold he had endured. Behind him came his crew, 46 frightened souls following their captain into the unknown. The first thing noticed was the gravity. It pulled at him harder than he was used to, making each step feel heavy and slow. He had heard that Earth was a high-gravity world, but feeling it was different from knowing it. The humans lived with this weight every moment of their lives. No wonder they were so strong. The second thing he noticed was the size of everything. The corridors were tall and wide, built for creatures bigger than the doors were thick and heavy, designed to withstand damage that would tear through any ship. Everything felt solid, powerful, built to last through violence and destruction. Commander walked beside him, matching his pace to the older captain's slower steps. "The medical bay is this way," he said in his careful galactic common. "Doctor will take care of your injured crew members first." Nodded but said nothing. He was too busy observing, too busy trying to understand these strange creatures who had saved his life. The medical bay was large, equipped with technology did not recognize. Doctor was already there, preparing her instruments with quick, efficient movements. She was a small human by their standards, with long black hair tied back and gentle eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Please bring the injured here," she said, gesturing to a row of beds. "I have studied biology. I know what you need." 3 crew members were carried in, their scales pale and their bodies shaking from hypothermia. Examined each one carefully, her strange predator eyes soft with concern. She wrapped them in heating blankets, injected them with warming agents, and connected them to machines that monitored their vital signs. "They will recover," she told. "The cold was severe but not fatal. With rest and warmth they will be fine." Stared at her. "You know our biology." "I studied it," said simply. "Before we entered this region of space, I learned about every species we might encounter, your people, and others. Medicine requires knowledge. I gathered as much as I could." "Why?" asked. It was the same question he had asked Commander, the same question he could not stop asking. "Why do you care about us?" Paused in her work and looked at him directly. Her eyes were strange, focused in a way that made feel like prey being studied. But there was no hunger in that gaze, only patience. "Because life is precious," she said. "Every life in every form, my job is to preserve it wherever I find it." She returned to her patience, adjusting the heating blankets with gentle hands. "You are not my enemy. You are not my friend. You are simply people who need help. That is enough." Had no response. He stood in silence as worked, watching the tend to his crew with the same care a mother might show her children. Elsewhere on the steady hand, the rest of them were being settled into temporary quarters. The rooms were simple but comfortable, with beds and heating units and supplies of food and water. Human crew members moved among them, offering assistance and answering questions in broken galactic common. Young, a junior technician on his first voyage, sat alone in a corner and watched the humans with wide eyes. He was barely 15 cycles old, the youngest member of the Gentle Wings crew. He had never seen an alien before this journey, and now he was surrounded by the most terrifying aliens in the galaxy. A human approached him. She was young like him, with short hair and a warm smile. She sat down beside him without asking permission, her movements slow and careful. "Hello," she said in uncertain galactic common. "I am Jinnah. Are you scared?" Nodded, unable to speak. Jinnah's smile grew softer. "That is okay. I would be scared too." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of colored paper folded into an intricate shape. "This is called origami. It is an art from my world. Would you like to learn?" Looked at the paper creature. It was beautiful, a bird with delicate wings and a pointed beak. He had never seen anything like it. "Why?" he asked, his voice small. "Because making things is calming," Jinnah said. "When I was young and scared, my grandmother taught me origami. It helped me focus on something other than my fear." She held out a blank piece of paper. "Would you like to try?" Hesitated, then took the paper. Jinnah began teaching him, guiding his clawed fingers through the folds. The paper kept tearing at first, too fragile for his sharp scales. But Jinnah was patient, offering new sheets each time without complaint. After many attempts, managed to create something that vaguely resembled a bird. It was crooked and messy, nothing like Jinnah's perfect creation. But when he looked at it, he felt something strange. He felt proud. "Good job," Jinnah said warmly. "You learned fast." For the first time since the reactor failed, smiled. In the engineering section of the steady hand, Engineer Wu was explaining the situation to Captain and his chief engineer. They stood around a holographic display of the Gentle Wing, watching as Wu pointed out the damage. The reactor core is cracked here, Wu said, highlighting a section of the ship. The damage is beyond repair with the tools we have. Even if we could fix it, the ship's structural integrity is compromised. One hard burn and the whole thing could break apart. Scales had gone pale, so there is nothing we can do. For the ship, no. Wu met his eyes with sympathy. But for you, there is everything we can do. We will take you to the nearest Allied station. From there, you can contact your people and arrange transport home. And the cargo? Asked. He had been carrying medical supplies for a colony world, desperately needed vaccines and medicines. The thought of them floating uselessly in the void was painful. Wu considered this. The cargo bays are still intact. If you want, we can transfer the supplies to our ships. We will deliver them for you. Stared at him. You would do that? Of course. Medicine is medicine. People need it. We will make sure it gets there. Shook his head slowly. I do not understand you humans. You gain nothing from helping us. You spend your fuel, your time, your resources. What is the profit? Wu laughed, a strange barking sound that startled the. Not everything is about profit, he said. Some things are about doing what is right. He paused, his smile fading into something more serious. On Earth we have a saying, no one left behind. It means that we do not abandon people, even when it costs us, especially when it costs us. Why? Asked. Because today it is you, Wu said quietly. Tomorrow it might be us. And when that day comes, we hope someone will answer our call just like we answered yours. They had no response. They stood in silence, contemplating a worldview so different from their own that it seemed almost impossible. On the bridge of the Soul's Promise, Admiral received updates from her teams and coordinated the ongoing rescue operation. The cargo transfer was proceeding smoothly. The injured were stable. The evacuation was complete. Everything was going according to plan. But knew that the real challenge was just beginning. They would be talking about this encounter for years. They would tell their families, their friends, their governments. The story would spread across the galaxy. Humans responded to a distress call and saved 47 alien lives. Not because they had to, not because they gained anything, but simply because someone needed help. Some species would not believe it. They would call it propaganda, deception, a trick to lower defenses. Humans they were monsters. Monsters did not save people. But some species would listen, some would remember, and slowly over time the stories would change. That was how saw her mission. Not just patrol, not just security, but building trust, one rescue at a time. Showing the galaxy that humanity was more than its reputation, more than its fearsome origin world, more than the violence that had defined its early history. It was slow work. It was often thankless work, but it was the most important work had ever done. Admiral, said Lieutenant Bora from her communications station, the captain is requesting to speak with you. Nodded, put him through. Captain's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired, aged beyond his years by the ordeal he had endured. But there was something new in his eyes, something that had not been there before. Admiral, he said formally, I wanted to thank you personally. You saved my crew, you saved my life. You called for help, replied. We answered, there is nothing to thank. Shook his head. That is not true. Many ships would have ignored our signal. Many species would have left us to die. You chose differently. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I have been a captain for 40 cycles. I thought I understood the galaxy. I thought I knew how species treated each other. He met her eyes through the screen. I was wrong. Said nothing, she simply listened. The stories about your kind are terrifying, continued. We believed them, all of us believed them. When we saw your ships, we thought we were dead. His voice cracked slightly. But you did not kill us, you saved us. Your doctor healed our injured. Your engineers preserved our cargo. Your crew members taught our children games to ease their fear. He swallowed hard. I do not understand why, but I am grateful beyond words. Leaned back in her chair and considered her response carefully. This moment mattered. What she said next would shape how this captain viewed humanity for the rest of his life. "Captain," she said finally, "the stories about us are not all false. We are a dangerous species. Our world made us strong, aggressive, hard to kill. When we fight with everything we have." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But strength is a choice. We can use it to destroy or we can use it to protect. We choose protection, not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to afford mercy." Listened in silence. "Your people have heard stories of human violence," continued. "Those stories are true. We have fought terrible wars. We have done terrible things, but we have also learned from those mistakes. We have grown. We have changed." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The humans you see today are not the humans of our past. We are better, and we are trying to prove that to the galaxy, one life at a time." Was quiet for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. "I believe you," he said. "I do not know if my people will believe me when I tell them, but I will tell them anyway. I will tell them that answered our call, and instead of death they brought hope." Smiled. "That is all we ask. Tell your story. Let the truth spread. Maybe someday we will not be feared." "Maybe someday," agreed. "Until then, Admiral of Earth, know that you have a friend among the. Whatever happens, I will not forget what you did here." The communication ended. Sat alone on her bridge, staring at the stars through the viewport. The galaxy was vast and cold, filled with species that feared and hated each other. Trust was rare. Kindness was rarer. But today something had changed. A small change, barely noticeable in the grand scope of things. But small changes added up over time. They built into something larger, something stronger. Had no illusions. Humanity would not be redeemed in a single day. The work of building trust would take generations, maybe centuries, but it had to start somewhere. It started here, with 47 lives saved and one captain's gratitude. It was enough. The gentle wing was dying faster than anyone had expected. Engineer Wu stood in the cargo bay of the Steady Hand and watched through the viewport as the ship began to break apart. Small pieces were already drifting away from the hull, fragments of metal and ceramic spinning slowly into the void. The structural damage was worse than his initial scans had shown. Without power to maintain pressure, the ship was tearing itself apart. "We have maybe 3 hours," Wu reported to Admiral over the communication link. "After that, the cargo bays will decompress. We will lose everything." "Can you save the medical supplies?" asked. "Yes, but we need to move fast. I am requesting permission to take a team back to the gentle wing." There was a brief pause, then's voice came back calm and steady. "Permission granted. Take whoever you need. Those supplies have to reach the colony." Wu gathered his team quickly. He chose 6 humans for the mission. Himself, 2 cargo specialists, and 3 engineers who could handle the transfer equipment. He also asked for volunteers from the crew. To his surprise, several stepped forward, including the young technician and the chief engineer. "You do not have to come," Wu told them. "Your ship is dangerous now. The hull could collapse at any time." Shook his head. "That cargo is our responsibility. We were hired to deliver it. If you are willing to risk your lives to save it, so are we." Wu nodded, respecting the decision. "Then let us move." The team crossed back to the gentle wing through a temporary docking tube that the humans had set up. The ship felt different now, emptier and colder than before. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the corridors, casting strange shadows on the frost-covered walls. Every few seconds, a distant groaning sound echoed through the hull as metal twisted and warped under stress. "Stay together," Wu ordered. "Watch your step. If you hear the hull starting to buckle, run for the docking tube immediately. Do not wait for me or anyone else." "Understood." Everyone nodded. They moved through the ship in single file, following Wu's lead. The cargo bay was located at the rear of the vessel, past the engineering section and the crew quarters. It was a long walk through dying corridors, past rooms that would never be used again. walked near the back of the group, his young eyes taking in everything. He had served on this ship for only a few months, but it had been his first home away from home. Seeing it like this, cold and broken, felt like watching a friend die. One of the human cargo specialists, a woman named Sarah, noticed his distress. She slowed her pace to walk beside him. "First time losing a ship?" she asked gently. Nodded, unable to speak. "It hurts," Sora said. "No matter how many times it happens, it always hurts." She put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that felt strange but oddly comforting. "But ships can be replaced. People cannot. You are alive. Your crew is alive. That is what matters." "I know," whispered, "but I still feel like I failed." Sora shook her head. "You survived. That is not failure. That is strength." They reached the cargo bay without incident. The room was large, filled with sealed containers stacked in neat rows. Each container held medical supplies, vaccines, surgical equipment, antibiotics, emergency treatment kits. Thousands of lives depended on these supplies reaching the colony world of. Wu began scanning the containers, prioritizing the most essential items. "We cannot take everything," he announced. "The docking tube can only handle so much weight. We focus on the critical medicines first, then grab whatever else we can carry." The team went to work. Humans and worked side by side, moving containers toward the exit with practiced efficiency. The humans were stronger, able to lift loads that would have taken 3 to move. But they knew the inventory, guiding the humans to the most important supplies. For a while, everything went smoothly. Containers were passed down the line, carried through the corridors, loaded onto the steady hand. The pile in the cargo bay grew smaller with each trip. Then the ship groaned, louder than before. Everyone froze. The sound echoed through the hull, a deep metallic cry that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floor shook beneath their feet. "Move," Wu shouted. "Get to the docking tube now." The team ran. They abandoned the remaining containers and sprinted through the corridors, their feet pounding against the deck. Behind them, the groaning grew louder, joined by the sharp cracking sounds of metal giving way. Ran as fast as his legs could carry him, but the heavy gravity of the human ship had tired him out. He stumbled, his clawed feet slipping on the frost-covered floor. He fell hard, hitting the deck with a painful thud. Sora was beside him instantly. She grabbed his arm and pulled him upright, practically lifting him off the ground. "Come on, do not stop." They ran together, Sora half carrying the young as the ship collapsed around them. A section of ceiling fell just behind them, crashing to the deck with a thunderous boom. The corridor ahead was buckling, the walls bending inward. "We are not going to make it," gasped. "Yes, we are," Sora said firmly. "Keep running." They reached the docking tube just as the corridor behind them gave way. Sora shoved through the hatch, then dove after him. The tube shook violently as the gentle wing tore itself apart. On the other side, hands grabbed them and pulled them to safety. The docking tube disconnected with a sharp bang, sealing itself moments before the gentle wing's rear section collapsed into a twisted mass of metal and debris. Lay on the deck of the steady hand, breathing hard, his heart's pounding in his chest. He was alive. Sora had saved him. He looked up at the human woman who had risked her life for a stranger. She was breathing hard too, her face covered in sweat, but she was smiling. "I told you we would make it," she said. Did not know what to say. He had grown up hearing that humans were monsters, that they cared only for conquest and destruction. But this monster had saved his life without hesitation. She had carried him when he could not run. She had refused to leave him behind. "Thank you," he whispered, the words feeling entirely inadequate. Sora's smile softened. "No thanks needed, it is what we do." On the bridge of the Soul's Promise, Admiral received the report with a mixture of relief and concern. The cargo team had returned safely, but the gentle wing was gone. Only about 2/3 of the medical supplies had been saved. "It will have to be enough," she said quietly. "Contact the colony. Tell them what happened. Tell them we are coming with what we could save." The fleet continued its journey toward the nearest Allied station. The survivors remained aboard the Soul's Promise, occupying the refugee quarters that the humans had prepared. Slowly, over the hours that followed, the fear began to fade. Captain spent his time walking among his crew, checking on each member personally. He found them in better condition than he had expected. The humans had provided everything they needed: warmth, food, medical care, and most importantly, kindness. In one of the common rooms, he found a group of young gathered around Jinnah, the human crew member who had taught origami. She was now teaching them a different game, something called rock, paper, scissors. The rules were simple, and the children laughed as they played, their fear forgotten. Watched from the doorway, his old hearts filled with something he could not name. Joy, perhaps, or wonder, or simply gratitude. Doctor found him there, standing alone. She approached quietly and stood beside him. "They are recovering well," she said. "The psychological trauma will take time to heal, but they are strong. They will be okay." Nodded slowly. "You humans continue to surprise me." "How so?" "Your doctor heals our injured. Your engineer risked his life to save our cargo. Your crew members comfort our children." He turned to look at her directly. "Every action you take contradicts everything we believed about your species." Was quiet for a moment, then she spoke, her voice thoughtful. "Do you know what it is, Captain? Not the propaganda, but the reality." Shook his head. "It is a world where everything is trying to kill you," said. "The air, the water, the animals, the weather, everything. Humans evolved on such a world. We survived because we learned to work together. We protected the weak. We cared for the sick. We built communities where everyone contributed to everyone else's survival." She paused, meeting his eyes. "That is what made us strong, not violence. Cooperation. The violence came later when we had to defend what we had built." Considered her words. "So you are saying your aggression is a defense mechanism?" "In a way, we fight hard because we have much to protect," smiled gently. "But fighting is not our first choice. It never has been. Our first choice is always to help, to build, to create. We only fight when we must." Looked back at the children playing in the common room. Jinnah was laughing with them, her strange human face bright with joy. She did not look like a monster. She looked like a friend. "I have been a captain for 40 cycles," said slowly. "I have met many species. I have learned many things. But today I learned the most important lesson of my life." "What is that?" asked. "That the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are also capable of the greatest kindness." He turned to her and bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect among the. "I will carry this lesson with me until I die, and I will teach it to everyone I meet." Bowed her head in return. "That is all we can ask." That night, as the fleet traveled through the darkness of space, they slept peacefully for the first time since their ordeal began. They were surrounded by the most feared species in the galaxy, and yet they felt safe. Because the monsters had proven themselves to be guardians. The predators had chosen to protect. They had answered a call for help and delivered mercy instead of death. And for 47 survivors floating through the void, that made all the difference in the universe. Lay in his temporary quarters, staring at the ceiling. Beside him on the small table sat the origami bird he had made with Jinnah's help. It was still crooked, still messy, still imperfect, but it was his. He picked it up and studied it in the dim light. Such a small thing made of folded paper, and yet it represented something much larger. It represented hope. Hope that the galaxy could change. Hope that fear could become trust. Hope that enemies could become friends. Placed the bird carefully on his chest and closed his eyes. Tomorrow they would reach the Allied station. Tomorrow they would begin the journey home. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight he slept peacefully, dreaming of paper birds and gentle humans, and a galaxy that was perhaps not as cruel as he had believed. The Allied station hung in space like a jewel of light and metal, orbiting a blue gas giant in a system claimed by no single species. It was neutral territory, a place where different civilizations came to trade, negotiate, and occasionally resolve their differences without violence. The station had been built centuries ago by a coalition of species who believed that cooperation was better than conflict. Captain stood on the observation deck of the Soul's Promise and watched the station grow larger through the viewport. Beside him stood Admiral, her hands clasped behind her back, her face calm and unreadable. "We will reach docking range in approximately 1 hour," said. "Your people have already been. A transport is on its way to take you home." Nodded slowly. The journey was almost over. In a few hours, he and his crew would be among their own kind again, surrounded by familiar scales and familiar voices and familiar ways of thinking. It should have felt like a relief. Instead, he felt a strange sadness. "I do not want to leave," he admitted quietly. Glanced at him with surprise. "You do not?" "No," shook his head. "These past few days have been the most confusing of my life, but also the most enlightening. I have learned more about your species in this short time than I learned about any other species in 40 cycles of traveling the galaxy." Smiled a small but genuine expression. "What have you learned?" Considered the question carefully. He thought about everything he had witnessed. The doctors healing his crew, the engineers saving his cargo, the crew members teaching his children games. He thought about the gravity that pulled at his body, the strange forward-facing eyes, the teeth that showed when humans smiled. He thought about how terrifying it all was, and how wrong his terror had been. "I learned that strength and kindness are not opposites," he said finally. "I learned that the most powerful beings can also be the most gentle. I learned that the galaxy's stories about humanity are incomplete." He turned to face directly. "And I learned that I want to change those stories." Raised an eyebrow. "Change them how?" "By telling the truth," said. "When I return to my people, I will speak to the Galactic Council. I will tell them what happened here. I will tell them that answered our distress call and saved our lives. I will tell them that the humans we met were not monsters, but heroes." Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "That is a brave thing to do, Captain. Many will not believe you. Some may even call you a liar or a fool." "Let them," said firmly. "The truth does not care about politics or prejudice. The truth simply is, and the truth is that your people saved mine." Bowed her head slightly, a gesture she had learned from during their time together. "Then I wish you well in your mission, Captain, and I hope that someday our species will stand together as allies instead of strangers." "So do I," said. "So do I." The Soul's Promise docked with the Allied station an hour later. The survivors gathered near the main airlock, preparing to disembark. They carried with them the few belongings they had salvaged from the Gentle Wing, along with the supplies the humans had given them for the journey home. Captain walked among them one last time, checking on each crew member personally. He found them in good spirits, better than he had expected. The fear that had gripped them when the human fleet first appeared was gone, replaced by something new. Gratitude, perhaps, or respect. He found, standing near the airlock, the origami bird tucked carefully into his pocket. The young technician was staring at the docking tube that led to the station, his face uncertain. "Are you ready to go home?" asked. Hesitated. "I am not sure, Captain. Everything feels different now." "Different how?" Thought about it for a moment. "Before this happened, I knew exactly what I believed. Humans were monsters. The galaxy was dangerous. The only way to survive was to fear everything stronger than you." He paused, touching the pocket where the bird rested. "Now I do not know what to believe anymore." Put a hand on the young man's shoulder. "That is not a weakness, that is growth. The galaxy is more complicated than we were taught. The truth is harder to find than we imagined. But that is not a bad thing. It simply means we have more to learn." Nodded slowly, I think I want to learn more about humans, about their world, their history, their culture. He looked up with determined eyes. I want to understand them. Smiled. Then perhaps you should ask Admiral about exchange programs. I hear humans welcome students from other species. His eyes widened. You think they would accept after everything they have done for us? I think they would accept anyone willing to learn. The young technician grinned, the first real smile had seen from him since the journey began. I will ask. I will definitely ask. The crew filed through the airlock and onto the station. As they left, many of them paused to bow to the human crew members who had saved them. Commander stood near the entrance, shaking hands with each who passed. Doctor handed out small medical kits, gifts for the journey home. Engineer Wu offered technical diagrams, guides for maintaining the systems he had helped repair. Jenna stood off to the side with the young children she had befriended. She hugged each of them in turn, a human gesture that they had come to understand and appreciate. Many of the children cried, not wanting to leave their new friend behind. I will miss you, one of them said, her small voice trembling. Jenna knelt down to meet her eyes. I will miss you too, but this is not goodbye forever. Maybe someday we will meet again. Promise? Jenna smiled warmly. I promise. Captain was the last to leave. He stood at the airlock for a long moment, looking back at the ship that had become his unlikely sanctuary. Admiral approached him one final time. Captain, before you go, I have something for you. She handed him a small device, a communication beacon marked with human symbols. What is this? Asked. A direct line to the Earth Defense Fleet, explained. If you ever need help, use this. We will come. Stared at the device in his hand. Such a small thing, such an incredible gift. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for everything. Shook her head. No thanks are needed. You called for help, we answered, that is all. No, said firmly. It is more than that, much more. He clutched the beacon tightly. You have given me hope, Admiral. Hope that the galaxy can be better. Hope that fear can be overcome. Hope that strangers can become friends. Smiled, and for a moment, her predator eyes looked almost soft. That is what we hope too, Captain. That is what we fight for every single day. Bowed deeply, the most respectful gesture I could offer. Then he turned and walked through the airlock, leaving the soul's promise behind. On the station, a transport was waiting. His crew boarded quickly, eager to begin the journey home, but himself lingered near the viewport, watching as the human fleet prepared to depart. The ships detached from the station one by one, their engines flaring with blue fire. The Soul's Promise was the last to leave, its massive hull turning slowly toward the stars. Commander appeared on one of the external screens, waving goodbye. Beside him stood Doctor, Engineer Wu, Jenna, and the rest of the crew. They were smiling, their strange human faces bright with warmth. Waved back, even though they probably could not see him. Then the Soul's Promise accelerated, jumping into faster-than-light travel with a flash of light. In an instant, the human fleet was gone, vanished into the endless void. But they were not truly gone. They would never be truly gone. Because Captain carried their memory with him, their kindness, their courage, their strange and wonderful humanity. And he would share that memory with the galaxy. 3 days later, stood before the Galactic Council on Prime. The council chamber was massive, filled with representatives from a dozen different species. They had gathered to hear his testimony, to learn what had happened to the Gentle Wing and its crew. Told them everything. He told them about the reactor failure and the dying signal. He told them about the terror they felt when human ships appeared. He told them about Commander's gentle voice and Doctor's healing hands. He told them about Engineer Wu's sacrifice and Jenna's origami birds. He told them about the long night aboard the Soul's Promise and the warmth the humans had provided. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Then slowly the questions began. Some council members were skeptical. They demanded proof, evidence, verification. Others were openly hostile, calling a liar or a fool. But some listened, some believed. "If what you say is true," said the elderly representative from the collective, "then everything we thought we knew about humans is wrong." "Not wrong," corrected. "Incomplete. Humans are dangerous, they are powerful, they can be violent when they must be, but they are also kind, they are also compassionate, they help strangers without asking for anything in return." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They are not monsters, they are simply different, and different does not mean evil." The debate continued for hours. In the end, no formal decision was reached. The galaxy did not change overnight. Fear and prejudice did not disappear. But seeds were planted. In the months that followed, other species began to tell similar stories. A freighter rescued by human patrol ships. A colony saved from a disease outbreak by human medical teams. A space station protected from pirates by human warships. One story at a time, the truth began to spread. And back on the Soul's Promise, Admiral continued her mission. She patrolled the void, answered distress calls, saved lives. She knew that change was slow. She knew that trust was hard to build. But she also knew that every life saved was a step forward. Every rescued ship was a bridge between species. Every act of kindness was a victory against fear. Years later, when the Inhumanity finally signed their first formal alliance, Captain was there to witness it. He was old by then, his silver scales faded to gray, his eyes dimmed by age. But his spirit was as strong as ever. He watched as Admiral, now promoted to Fleet Commander, signed her name beside the representative. The chamber erupted in applause. Afterward found him in the crowd. "We did it," she said. "The alliance is official." Smiled, a gesture he had learned from humans long ago. "We did. But we both know this is just the beginning." Nodded, the beginning of something better. They stood together in silence, two old warriors who had fought not with weapons but with kindness. Behind them, the future stretched out like an endless void, full of possibilities and challenges and unknown wonders. But for the first time, that void did not seem so dark. Because somewhere out there were answering distress calls. Humans were saving lives. Monsters were proving themselves to be friends. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, was learning that the most fearsome beings in the universe were also the most capable of love. That was the lesson of the gentle wing. That was the gift of the Soul's Promise. And it was a gift that would echo through the stars forever.